Today we're going to be making Chia Fresca or Iskiate. For this you'll need some water, chia seeds, it doesn't really matter what type of chia seeds you use, honey, and some limes. And finally you'll need a pitcher or a container to put everything in. I'm just using a water pitcher right here, but yeah. Once you've gotten all your ingredients, the first thing you want to do is juice your limes. I'm using my hands here because I like using my hands. You can use a juicer if you want, but I'm just using my hands here. I'm only using one lime for this because I have homegrown limes, and the ones I grow at my house, they're pretty big compared to store-bought ones. If you're using store-bought ones, I recommend using 1.5 to 1.5 or 1 lime, depending on their size. While you're juicing, some seeds might happen to fall in. If this happens, just scoop it out with your hands or a spoon. It's fine. But as you can see, I'm kind of struggling here with scooping them out, but I'm trying my best. After you're done juicing your limes and taking out the seeds, go rinse off your hands. Pour in about 2 cups of water. I used 2 1/3 cups because my limes are pretty thick compared to most other limes. But after you put in that water, take out your chia seeds. It doesn't really matter what kind you use again, and put in about 1 tablespoon. I'm just eyeballing it here because the amount of chia seeds you have in the drink doesn't have to be too accurate. And yeah, some people like more chia seeds, some people like less. Next, you want to put in some of that golden nectar. I'm using Tupelo honey here because I think it has an amazing taste, but it's kind of expensive, so you guys can use whatever type of honey you have. And if you don't have honey or you can't eat honey, you can use agave nectar as a substitute, since it's pretty traditional. You're going to want to mix in about 1 tablespoon of whatever sweetener you're using. I'm just eyeballing it here because again, it does not have to be completely accurate. So this might take a while to dissolve though, because the liquid's kind of thick, so yeah. But if you're too lazy to mix it, you can just scrape it off the spoon and let it dissolve over time. So yeah, as you guys can see here, it's taking a while for my honey to dissolve, since I used cold water in the beginning, so I had to stir it for a while, and I eventually just let it sit there and dissolve over time. After you got everything mixed in, you want to put this in the fridge for about 4 to 5 hours. Doesn't really matter how long, as long as it's longer than 4 hours. Or you can just wait until the seeds have swollen up and kind of look like frog spawn. Now while we wait for the chia seeds to swell up and for it to cool down, let's talk about the history of Chia Fresca or Iskiate. It's a drink made from chia seeds, lime, water, and honey or agave nectar. To understand the origins of this drink, we must first look at where the main ingredient came from, the chia seed. This seed comes from a flowering plant that's from the mint family. The color of these flowers is typically a lavender or purple color. The origins of the chia seeds date back to as far as 3500 BC in the records of the Aztecs. Later, this seed was cultivated in Mexico by the Tehuacan and Toltec people from 1500 BC to 900 BC. Since this time, many different species of chia seed have been grown, but the most well-known species is called Salvia hispanica. That's the chia seeds I used in this video. The origins of the name chia came from the Mayan language, where it means strength, because it was thought to give strength and stamina to the warriors who ate it. Eventually, the chia seed got to the Tarahumara tribe in Chihuahua, Mexico, where this seed was added to their diet due to its many benefits in health and the belief that it gave stamina and strength to those who consumed it. The Tarahumara people created various uses for the chia seeds in their food, but the most well-known use for the seed was in the drink called Iskiate. This drink is a very prominent part of the Tarahumara people's diet due to their lifestyle of running for extremely long distances, and it was first introduced to the rest of the world through the book Born to Run, where the author ventured into the Copper Canyon and learned about the mysterious Tarahumara people. There are a couple variations to the amounts of ingredients in this drink and what you use, but most recipes consist of water, chia seeds that are sometimes roasted, lime or lemon juice, and either agave nectar or honey. Some recipes for this drink, the chia seeds are grounded after roasting and only mixed with water. Either way, the Iskiate drink provides numerous health benefits because of its rich nutritional content of omega-3 fatty acids, electrolytes, calcium, dietary fiber, protein, vitamin C, iron, potassium, and carbohydrates. All these things help in rehydrating, maintaining, and providing energy to the Tarahumara people for their runs. Often this drink is consumed before and after their runs, and it can be most closely compared to the sports drinks we have nowadays. But I personally believe that Iskiate is much better than the sports drinks we have these days, like Gatorade or any other fancy type of sports drinks. After a few hours, the seeds should have swollen up. I recommend stirring before serving to get an even amount of seeds in each drink. But drink it however you like. The next thing I'm making is called Pinole, and I'm making it into a sort of cake or bar. What you'll need for this is some cornmeal, preferably treated with the chemical lime, but you can just use regular cornmeal. I'm using a cheap cornmeal from Walmart, which probably wasn't the best idea, and you'll see why in a bit. The next thing you're gonna need is either agave, which is more traditional, but I'm using brown rice syrup here because it's what the recipe calls for, and it helps stick everything together better. Next, you'll need a little bit of cinnamon, some water, dates, and chia seeds. Again, it doesn't really matter what type. Before you start mixing everything together, you'll need to toast your chia seeds and cornmeal. For this, just mix 1 cup of cornmeal and 2 tablespoons of chia seeds into a skillet. Once you've gotten everything in the skillet, you'll want to toast your chia seeds and cornmeal over medium heat for about 5 to 8 minutes while stirring regularly to make sure everything toasts evenly. Make sure the heat is not too high or too low and adjust accordingly over the time you're toasting it, and because this can lead to your chia seeds and cornmeal not toasting, or it can lead to it burning. This process is a bit tricky, and I'm pretty sure I messed up on it, but at least I tried. After 5 to 8 minutes of toasting, take out the mixture and put it into a bowl or container. Make sure you don't spill everything here because I kind of spilled everything, but make sure you don't spill it while you're putting it into the bowl. For combining everything, I highly recommend using a food processor, but I don't have one, so I'm just using an old blender I have. First, you'll want to mix in your mixture of chia seeds and cornmeal. Then add in 3 tablespoons of either the agave or brown rice syrup, whichever one you decided to use. Next, you'll add in 2/3 of a cup of water, a 1/4 cup of dates, or about 5 to 6 whole pitted dates. Make sure they're pitted because you don't want seeds breaking your blades. Then a dash of cinnamon. You could also use a dash of salt to bring out the flavors in this, but the recipe I'm using doesn't call for any salt, so I'm just not using it. After you have everything in the food processor or blender, mix it until it's become almost a homogeneous mixture. Since I'm using a blender, I had a lot of troubles in this step, and it took me a really long time. I even had to add some water because the mixture was too thick, and I think that had some negative consequences later. But yeah, guys, I recommend just sticking with the 2/3 cup of water instead of adding more, even if it looks a little too dry or thick, because it makes the dough too moist later. Next, you're going to want to prepare a baking sheet with some parchment paper if you want, or you can also just leave it bare because the dough isn't very sticky. I used parchment paper here because I just wanted to make sure it wouldn't stick. The amount of dough this recipe makes is enough to make 3 cakes. You're going to want to space these cakes out and make them about 3/4 of an inch thick or thinner if you like it crispier, and about 4 to 5 inches across. You can just use your hands to shape these because the dough isn't sticky at all. After you've shaped your cakes, put them into a 350-degree oven for 10 to 12 minutes or until they've started to crack or are no longer soggy. Pinole is an extremely popular food or ingredient in Hispanic culture because it's made up of one of the most common ingredients in America, which is corn. What I'm making today is a form of pinole where it is turned into an energy bar or cake, which is very common amongst the Tarahumara people for its high nutritional density. The specific energy bar that I'm making consists of cornmeal, dates, brown rice syrup, chia seeds, and water. There are many variations of pinole in Tarahumara cooking, such as it being used in drinks or in oatmeal-like food. But I'm going to make the cake or energy bar form of pinole because it goes along with the other two dishes I have chosen. The recipe for pinole cakes vary from people to people depending on their preferences for sweetness, softness, spices, and whatnot. But in most recipes, there is cornmeal, some type of sweetener, such as the dates and brown rice syrup in this recipe, water, chia seeds, and sometimes cinnamon or some other types of spices. These ingredients help make the pinole cakes perfect for runners like the Tarahumara people due to the high amounts of carbohydrates from the corn and sweeteners, as well as the many amazing benefits that come with the chia seeds, as previously mentioned. Most of the time, these cakes are eaten before or after runs, but most people would probably end up eating these as dessert or for breakfast. The first recorded records of pinole are unclear, but it can be traced back to the Americas where it was presumed to have been first made by the Aztecs because the name pinole originates from the Aztec word pinole. Either way, pinole cakes are an amazing food and I recommend giving them a try. Now let's go take the cakes out of the oven. Once your cakes have finished baking, take them out of the oven. They should have some cracks around the edges and should be slightly yellow or golden. I either had too much liquid or the cornmeal was just the wrong type because mine's turned out a bit too soggy. If your cakes turn out a bit too soggy, I recommend putting them back in the oven for about 1 to 2 minutes. These cakes are very soft and chewy with a very light flavor and sweetness to them. You can eat these either cold or warm. I preferred them a little bit warm because they're a bit softer. What I'm making for dinner today is called the Three Sisters Stew. You might be wondering why it's called this, and I'll explain that in a bit. What you'll need for this stew is about 3 slices of bacon or 1 tablespoon of lard, 2 tablespoons olive oil, 1 onion, 2 cloves garlic, 1 bell pepper, half to 1 teaspoon of dried ancho chilies, 2 teaspoons finely chopped fresh thyme, or about 1 teaspoon dried, 2 cups of lima beans or other broad beans. I'm using frozen lima beans because I didn't have enough time to soak dry ones and cook them, but if you have the time, that would be better probably. You'll also need 2 cups of fresh or frozen corn or pre-cooked pozole, or 2 cups of canned hominy, 2 cups of delicata squash. I'm using butternut squash because I couldn't find any delicata squash, 3 tomatoes or 14 ounces of canned diced tomatoes, 1 cup of chicken or vegetable broth or water, and finally 1 bunch of cilantro. First, you need to cut and prepare all of your ingredients. Peel your squash and cut about 1/4 to 1/3 of the squash into cubes. Cut your bacon into 1-inch slices. Dice up your bell pepper. Cut your onions into slices or dice them. Chop up your cilantro. Smash your garlic and chop them into chunks, or you can leave them as is. I'm using a little more garlic than the recipe requires, but that's just because I like my garlic. And finally, dice your tomatoes or just slice them. Doesn't really matter because it will be broken down once you boil it. So yeah. Once you have all your ingredients cut and prepared, take out a large saucepan or a large pot and turn the stove to high. After the pot has heated up, put in your lard along with the 2 tablespoons of olive oil, or put in the olive oil first, then the bacon if you're using bacon. I'm used to cooking with a non-stick pan, so I forgot to put the oil in before the bacon, so my bacon stuck a little to the pot, but it's fine. After your lard has melted or the fat on the bacon has mostly turned to oil, add in your garlic and saute for a few seconds. Next, add in your onions and diced bell peppers. Saute until the onions turn translucent, then add in your thyme and ancho chilies. Once your onions have started to turn slightly translucent, add in your lima beans, corn, tomatoes, and squash. I added in my cilantro too early on accident, but if you haven't added in your cilantro yet, you'll be adding that in before serving. After adding everything in, saute for 1 or 2 minutes. Then add in 1 cup of whichever liquid you have. I had to add in a little more than a cup of liquid into mine because the tomatoes I used weren't as juicy as they could have been. There should be enough liquid to the point where the majority of everything is covered by liquid. Cover up the pot and reduce to a simmer for about 20 to 25 minutes. Now while that's cooking, let me give you a brief rundown on this dish. The Three Sisters stew is a stew that originated from Native American culture. It's a stew that consists of multiple ingredients, but the main 3 ingredients in the stew are squash, beans, corn, or mayas. You might be wondering, why in the world is this dish called the Three Sisters stew? Well, this is because corn, squash, and beans are the 3 sisters. These 3 crops are commonly grown together due to their mutual relationships with each other, which help each other grow. The beans would use the corn stalks to climb while also fertilizing the soil through nitrogen fixation, and the squash would cover and protect the roots of both the beans and the corn. Throughout history, this dish has seen many changes and variations depending on preferences as well as the locations of the people who made it. The main difference between recipes are the types of squash, beans, spices, herbs, and meat used. The recipe I use today is one I found on pbs.org, and it was gotten from the local Tarahumara people in the Copper Canyon. I did differ from this recipe slightly by using butternut squash instead of delicata. But butternut squash is also a squash that was available to the Native American people. Usually this dish is eaten as a meal for dinner and is accompanied by some type of carbs such as tortillas. The low amount of meat in this stew shows how the Tarahumara people have low accessibility to meat and have a plant-heavy diet, which is typically optimal for the lifestyle of a runner. Now let's go check back on the stew. After everything's finished cooking, add in that cilantro now if you still have it, and add in salt and pepper according to taste. Serve while still warm. You can serve this with avocados, tortillas, or whatever you wish, or you can just eat it by itself. I have to say, the soup is quite good. It's very heavy on vegetables, so the soup tastes very clean yet rich. The ancho chilies give the soup a slight kick, while the thyme gives it a very aromatic flavor. I would highly recommend making this for yourself if you have the time and the ingredients.